A man does not collapse in a single night. He erodes in silence, in private, through small acts of surrender repeated so often that they begin to look normal. That is how strength leaves him. Not all at once, but piece by piece. His focus weakens, his presence thins out, his self-respect starts to fracture in places no one else can see. What destroys him is rarely one dramatic fall. It is the habit of choosing immediate pleasure over inner command. This is where the real battle begins, not in the world outside him, but in the unseen court within. Every urge obeyed without thought leaves a mark. Every compromise made in weakness teaches the mind that discipline can be negotiated. And once a man begins negotiating with his lower nature, he slowly loses the authority to govern his own life. The issue is not desire itself. Desire is part of being human. The issue is slavery. The moment a man is ruled by appetite, he is no longer standing at the center of himself. And a man who cannot rule himself will never hold real power over anything else. Look at the modern man, and you will often see no visible ruin. He still goes to work. He still speaks, laughs, posts, answers messages, and moves through the world as if nothing is wrong. But inside, something has been leaking for years. His mind is scattered. His attention is weak. He struggles to stay with one thought long enough to build anything real. He makes promises to himself in moments of clarity, then breaks them in moments of impulse. And every broken promise leaves behind a quieter kind of damage. Not noise, but erosion. This is the tragedy of modern weakness. It rarely announces itself with collapse. It hides inside patterns that seem ordinary. A man overstimulated by constant novelty begins to lose his taste for effort. A man ruled by impulse begins to fear silence, because silence forces him to meet himself. So he keeps consuming, keeps distracting, keeps escaping, while telling himself he is fine. But deep down, he knows something is off. He can feel the difference between who he is and who he could be. That is why this condition is so dangerous. It does not always destroy a man openly. It simply keeps him beneath his own ceiling. Many men today are not lacking talent, intelligence, or potential. They are bleeding willpower in private, day after day, until the strongest parts of them no longer speak with force. And this weakness does not begin with one act. It begins with a pattern. There is a difference between natural desire and a life built around stimulation. Desire, by itself, is not the enemy. The danger begins when a man becomes dependent on relief, novelty, and easy pleasure to regulate his inner state. Then he is no longer choosing with clarity. He is reacting, he is reaching, he is obeying. And every time that pattern is reinforced, a deeper faculty begins to weaken. A man who cannot endure discomfort will always drift toward what is immediate. He will choose release over restraint, distraction over depth, comfort over command. That is the true mechanism of decline. Cheap pleasure trains the mind to avoid tension instead of mastering it. It reduces the ability to delay reward. It weakens concentration. It fragments intention. It makes discipline feel heavy and indulgence feel natural. Over time, this does not just alter behavior, it alters character. This is why the issue runs deeper than habit. It touches the architecture of the will. The man who constantly feeds impulse loses his capacity to stand firm when life demands patience, suffering, sacrifice, or sustained effort. His inner world becomes easier to shake. His presence loses density. His words lose weight because he no longer fully trusts himself. Where discipline is repeatedly exchanged for gratification, masculine force begins to crack from the inside. Not because the man has no strength, but because strength unused becomes inaccessible. And when a man can no longer hold himself steady against his own appetites, he becomes vulnerable to everything outside him. And once this decay becomes common in the individual, it does not remain personal for long. A society is not built in the abstract. It is built out of the private condition of millions of souls. When enough men lose command of themselves, weakness begins to shape the culture around them. What starts as personal indulgence eventually becomes public atmosphere. A people formed by impulse will create a world that rewards impulse. A people that loses reverence for restraint will slowly begin to mock restraint itself. That is how disorder spreads without announcing itself. Entertainment grows louder. Stimulation becomes constant. Discipline is treated like repression. Moral seriousness is dismissed as outdated. The man who governs himself is called rigid, while the man who follows every appetite is called free. But this is not freedom. It is dependence wearing the mask of liberation. And no civilization can remain strong when it teaches its people to serve what should have been mastered. This is not to say that every social decline comes from one cause alone. History is never that simple. But there is always a pattern worth noticing. When a culture begins glorifying excess, trivializing self-control, and feeding the lower instincts of its people, something essential begins to rot at the foundation. Families weaken, trust weakens, standards weaken, the entire moral atmosphere becomes thinner. A strong society cannot be built by men who are inwardly divided. If a man cannot govern his impulses, he will struggle to protect anything higher than himself. And when that condition becomes widespread, decline is no longer a private matter. It becomes civilizational. History does not only record how nations were conquered, it also reveals how they softened before they fell. The most dangerous collapses rarely begin at the border. They begin in the inner life of a people. Long before walls are breached, character is breached. Long before order breaks in public, discipline breaks in private. This is one of the oldest lessons in history, and one of the most ignored. Again and again, strength rises through structure, sacrifice, restraint, and purpose. Then prosperity comes, comfort expands, pleasure multiplies, and slowly, almost invisibly, the virtues that built the society begin to be treated as burdens. What was once honored as discipline is now seen as unnecessary severity. What was once recognized as moral seriousness is replaced by amusement, appetite, and endless distraction. The civilization may still look impressive from the outside, but something in its core has already started to weaken. That pattern is not ancient in spirit. It is present now. The modern temptation is not merely stronger desire, but easier access. The pull of indulgence is no longer occasional. It is immediate, portable, and constant. A man does not need to seek temptation anymore. Temptation waits for him, follows him, studies him, and meets him the moment he is tired, lonely, or undisciplined. So the real warning from history is not just that empires fall. It is that they often fall after losing the ability to rule themselves. The enemy enters most easily where self-mastery has already been abandoned. And many times, the first surrender happens in darkness, in secrecy, in the quiet repetition of a private compromise. And when a man begins to take back command of himself, the change is not always loud, but it is unmistakable. His eyes become clearer because his mind is no longer clouded by constant craving. His thoughts begin to gather instead of scatter. He no longer leaks energy into every passing urge, every restless impulse, every low invitation that once pulled him off center. There is a new order in him, not forced, not performed, but built, quietly, repeatedly, from the inside out. You can feel the difference in a man like this. He speaks less, but his words carry more weight. He does not react to everything. He does not chase stimulation just to feel alive. He can sit in silence without being devoured by it. He can work with depth because his attention is no longer fractured into 100 private battles. He can look at discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. That alone separates him from most men. What returns first is not pride, but self-respect. And from self-respect comes a sharper form of energy. His presence grows denser. His decisions become cleaner. His body, mind, and speech begin moving in the same direction. He is no longer split between what he knows and what he does. That inner alignment creates a kind of force no performance can imitate. This is where real masculine presence is born, not in noise, not in image, not in domination for its own sake, but in self-rule. A man who has mastered his appetites carries a different gravity. He does not need constant validation because he is no longer living under constant inner defeat. And when a man restores order within himself, he becomes stronger not only in discipline, but in work, in relationships, in judgment, and in the quiet authority others can sense before he even speaks. But no man escapes this cycle through emotion alone. A surge of motivation is not enough. A strong reaction to truth is not yet transformation. The way out is not built on intensity. It is built on structure. Because what traps a man is rarely one moment of weakness. It is a system of repetition. So if he wants his freedom back, he must answer disorder with order. That begins with removing what keeps feeding the pattern. A man cannot speak of mastery while protecting the very things that keep him compromised. He must cut off the stimuli that inflame his lower nature. He must stop lingering in environments that make collapse easier. He must stop pretending that willpower alone can win a war against a life designed around temptation. Then he must replace, not merely resist. The body must be put under honest strain. The mind must be given real work. His hours must regain shape. Idleness is dangerous because it invites appetite to become occupation. A drifting man will always be more vulnerable than a directed one. The goal is not to spend every day fighting urges. The goal is to build a life in which those urges lose territory. And this is where character is rebuilt. Every private refusal strengthens the spine. Every unseen act of discipline restores a fragment of self-command. A man does not become powerful by making loud declarations. He becomes powerful by becoming reliable to himself. In the end, freedom is not the absence of desire. It is the ability to stand above it, remain unmoved, and choose what is higher even when no one is watching. So, in the end, the line is clear. A man either governs himself, or he is governed by what is lower than himself. There is no lasting strength in pretending otherwise. Titles do not make a man strong. Image does not make a man strong. Words do not make a man strong. What reveals him is the level of order he can hold within his own mind, his own body, and his own private life. This is where masculine character is truly measured, not by what a man claims in public, but by what he permits in secret, not by how loudly he speaks, but by how firmly he stands when appetite asks for surrender. The man who cannot command himself will always remain divided, and a divided man cannot carry real weight in this world. So the choice is not merely about pleasure, it is about direction. It is about whether you will continue leaking your force into what diminishes you, or gather it, discipline it, and rise into a life with form. Guard your energy, guard your habits, guard your inner ground. Because when a man keeps his self-respect, his discipline, and his command, he does not only change his behavior, he changes the quality of his entire existence.